All right, Pacers fans, we are back for yet another episode of the Pacers Post Up. Ryan, just as yesterday, I'm sitting here behind the mic, so to speak, with my AirPods in, saying, oh, we don't really have a lot of news. There's nothing going on in Pacers Nation. We get a Shams bomb, or whatever you want to call it these days. The announcement, the domino finally falling, that Benedict Mathurin has basically gotten out of the qualifying offer with the Clippers and is signing a 2-year, but effectively 1-year deal with the New Orleans Pelicans. It's 2 years, roughly $16 million. The second year is a player option. And the reporting is that Benedict Mathurin is betting on himself, and his intention is to enter unrestricted free agency next summer and retest the market. And listen, the market has spoken. This should not be a surprise for Pacers NBA fans around the league. I feel like the writing was on the wall, Ryan, from a Mathurin perspective, not just because of what he had done or not done in a Pacers slash whatever it was, 25, 26 games in a Clippers jersey, but what we have seen the market do with similar players in years past, particularly around this restricted free agency conversation. And there just hasn't been a market for these guys. And so I feel like for anybody that was thinking that Mathurin was going to land north of 20 million, 25 million, there just wasn't any sort of interest at that number around the league. I think it is interesting what New Orleans is now going to do with him, assuming he's going to slot into that starting lineup alongside DeJounte Murray. You've got Trey Murphy III. You've got Zion. There's, Derek Queen. New Orleans is interesting, I guess, but this is not a move that is going to have a whole lot of consequence in terms of the league. I think it'll be very interesting to see how Bennedict Mathurin approaches next season, because the reality is his knock for the first 4 now years of his career is that he has not been a team guy, hasn't been able to fit in, hasn't been able to find his opportunities within the flow of the system. And now he's betting on himself in a season where surely he wants to get shots up and put up stats and make it all about him. So is he going to be able to find that balance in New Orleans? That'll be something to pay attention to. If nothing else, we get a little bit more juice. Maybe Adam Silver knew all along that Benedict was going to go to New Orleans, and that's why he had the Pelicans slated for Tyrese's return from Achilles. I say that in full jest because that would be ludicrous. What say you, Ryan, on something that, sorry about you, the Pacers Post have had right for a very long time?
It's validation to what we said all of last season. It really is. And it comes down, no one in the league even wanted to take the risk on giving this guy money with the upside potential that fans have always clamored about. And the truth of the reality is Mathurin has not really improved as a defender since coming in the league. He started off hot on the scoring front, but hasn't really taken any major leaps. You could argue the shooting's improved, but he's been, somewhere in that 16 to 17 a game average for 4 seasons straight. He is known as a guy who's really gifted at getting to the rim and the free throw line. That part is true. He's not gifted at finishing around the rim. If you actually saw some of the things that come out, I think he was in the bottom 10 of the league at 35% shooting at the rim, because we know he jams himself up driving with no plan, gets into trouble, goes right into a guy. And so I wish him the best. I think this is a good opportunity for him to bet on himself in New Orleans, being a team that could use a scorer. He can be a starter. He's probably going to get high minutes, but that's what last season was with the Pacers. It's the same thing. It's another bet. And I bet that it wasn't going to work out last year. We shipped him. Now looking at the deal, the Clippers clearly, took a flyer on him, but that was not any key piece to the deal, letting him walk for $8 million. So it was mainly just a throw-in salary piece at that point to make contracts work. And so we do not have to spend more time on the post up really covering the Mathurin news, but it's not a shocker that in a league where everyone wants the young talent, that you have a restricted free agent like Mathurin who ends up going to a team on a, like you said, a 1-year deal, basically bet on yourself for $8 million. to a team like New Orleans, who's basically just taken bites out of the apple at this point. And so the league spoke, we spoke. Mathurin just has not proven to be a winning player to this point. He has crazy high flashes, but on a night to night basis, he usually hurts you more than he helps you. I hope he can turn that around. But we were talking 20, 25 million, maybe 30 million to begin the offseason last year. He settles at 8. That cannot be where he thought he'd be today.
No, he certainly did not. And I think, I don't want to speak for you, but you said it in your own way. We wish him well. I hope he is successful. I hope he is able to find a place in this league where he can maximize his earnings and all that. By all intents and purposes, he seems like an awesome dude. Like, it was never a question about the guy. I loved his edge. I loved his confidence. I hated his fit. And if you now look at the Zubats trade and the Kelly Oubre Jr. acquisition, I am much happier having Oubre Jr. on the books at that roughly $8 million number than I would have been at Benedict Mathurin. And the Zubats trade now looks almost like a steal. I mean, Keelan Wagler, Isaiah Jackson on a money deal, just kind of thrown in to make it work. Mathurin obviously doesn't have a lot of value around the league. That much has, been kind of borne out by the lack of a market for him here in this restricted free agency. And you've got one future first-round pick. And so you're talking about an all-defensive team center, somebody that was a fringe all-star a couple years ago, certainly in that top 10 positional ranking, if you will. I just look at it and I say, this is why you make the move. I think so many people in the fan world were really high on Bennedict Mathurin, and I don't think GMs around the league were nearly as high. And so when you balance it with where this has ultimately flushed itself out, I think that trade looks even stronger. And my God, Ryan, had we gotten a top 4 pick, I mean, a home run, knock it out of the park. It just, and we said that at the time, but even more so now. So like you said, don't need to spend a lot of other time on it. We have something really fun planned for this episode, and something that I don't think is frankly getting talked about a ton. And in the run to a championship, okay, this conversation that we're about to have has way more value than I think fans even realize. And a lot of it comes down to health, injury, availability, matchup-driven situations, and that is how deep, how strong is your bench? And we have been a team, we had the highest scoring bench in the league a couple of years ago. I think it was the first Eastern Conference Finals run, TJ McConnell leading that charge. But you look at from teams like OKC, even the Knicks last year winning a title under Mike Brown, not the Thibodeau, let's just play 6 guys, 45 minutes, actually leaning into Mitchell Robinson, Landry Shamet, Miles McBride, more depth. OKC has been the poster child of that for the last number of years. But, it is a conversation that doesn't get it's just not a sexy conversation, I guess is the best way I would put it, because so much of the attention is on LeBron goes to Philly. They get Jaylen Brown. Now it's Maxey. Now it's Embiid. Well, that's 4 guys, okay? Most of the time you're having to play 7, 8, maybe 9 guys, particularly if the injury bug is any part of the equation. You never hope for that, but you have to plan for it. So that is a long way to lead into Ryan and I are going to rank the top 5 bench units, meaning I shouldn't say it. We're going to rank every Eastern Conference team, all the bench units, top 5 players, the guys that factor to be their next 5. So if you've got your starting 5, this is the next 5, and we are ranking them 15 all the way down to 1. This episode will be part 1, where we rank 15 down to 9, and then we will finish part 2 ranking our top 8 bench units in the Eastern Conference. And Ryan, I'm going to kick this over to you to start, but I'm going to say this on the front side. This was hard as hell. There are names that I've never heard of. Some of these benches are not very deep. I can't wait for us to be at opposite ends of the spectrum for once in our life, because there is no way we are aligned on these rankings. This is one of the harder ranking exercises I think we've ever done on this show. One that I hope will be a lot of fun, and one that may actually be a meaningful 6-8 months from now, whenever we get to that on the back half of next year. So why don't you start us off? I don't know if you've got tiers. We've done reality dating. We've done all these things in the past to kind of make this make sense. Ryan, where do we begin?
Well, I spent enough time ranking them that I didn't have time for tiers because that's how hard this was. And I like how you put it because there's a lot of different ways to think about these bench units because there are bench units where it's like, maybe I think if I was taking this as like a team, if I just took this five, they're better than this, but I know the rotation's going to be different. Then we're going to talk about, is this guy going to be even coming off the bench? Is he going to be a starter? Like there are so many caveats. And so I'd be curious to fan reaction to this and just, you could disagree vehemently. What's the word?
Vehemently.
Vehemently. Yeah. I'm going to struggle. We're about to get to a team where a guy I looked up 3 times how to pronounce his name, and I can assure you I will butcher it. So let's just start there, knowing that this list could go wildly different depending on who you ask. This is how I felt today looking at it. And so starting off at 15, probably the worst team in the Eastern Conference, unshockingly might have the worst bench, and I had the Brooklyn Nets at 15. And on their bench, it's not terrible. So you've got Keon Ellis now in the mix, nice defender, not really much of a scorer, playmaker, but solid defender, can hit some, shots from outside, shot around 37%. Terrence Mann, kind of now journeyman. Noah Clowney, Mo Wagner is now there. He's a true, real big. This was the guy I've been trying to pronounce, Nolan Traore. I think that's somewhat right or completely butchered. A young guy, only 20, but had some flashes last year. But when I look at this, there's at least an identity or a stud, quote unquote, coming off the bench for most of these teams. I don't know who I get excited about in this. I think Nolan could be a solid player going forward, but really the best player on this is Noah Clowney, who, he averaged like 12 points last year, but shot under 40% from deep. He's a big, shot a ton of threes, but at 32%. They're not great defensively. They're not great offensively. They were last year actually higher in the league on scoring bench, ironically, but I think that's just because that's where Brooklyn is. So I look across this, I don't have a ton of playmaking. I don't have a ton of shooting. Like if you look across this list and probably where I land of the 5 guys I chose, there's not a guy above 36% from deep. And that's on the high side for them. So not a lot of playmaking, not a lot of shooting, okay defense here and there. There's just nothing sexy about this lineup. So I'd Brooklyn at 15.
Ryan, I had Brooklyn at 15, and this is probably the only spot that we're going to agree. And it was just obvious for all the reasons that you said. Like, none of these names jump off the page. None of them were, frankly, guys that I knew. I mean, Drake Powell, Ben Sarath, you talk about Traore. Like, I don't know. I know these are young guys, and I think what Brooklyn is clearly trying to do is say, we're going to play a lot of guys. They have Mikal Brown Jr. They've got Igor Demon from last year. They had so many draft picks over the last couple of seasons. And I think they're just going to throw shit against the wall and see what sticks. Do any of these guys pop, right? Like, who do you really want to rely on? Because Mo Wagner, I mean, it's a name, and he had a nice run there in Orlando. He's had availability issues. I don't think he's factoring in long-term, into their equation. Obviously, Danny Wolf is a guy that I don't know if, out of Michigan showed some things, but like, I just, you go down their depth chart, just what's listed online. I mean, there may be guys, they've got guys that are 4th and 5th positional, rankings. And I don't even know if they're going to play or not. Terrence Mann, like that's a name that he's 5th on the depth chart. Maybe he gets some run, maybe he doesn't. I don't know. So trying to pick the 5 for the Nets was almost impossible. And so I just look at it and I say, maybe this conversation looks different later in the year if somebody does pop. But to your point right now, there is no clear put the ball in his hands. He's your 6-man candidate. That's not what they have set up right now. So I had Brooklyn at 5, and I'll kind of kick us off on the next one here and just sort of snake it back and forth. I go 14, and I was really sort of torn on this, but I'm going to go Bulls at 14. Yep. Chicago Bulls, they're, when we did our Eastern Conference power rankings, I think I had them at 13 overall. I maybe had the Bucks behind them. From a Bulls perspective, there's just too many guys on this second unit that they're a rebuilding team, then they don't have rebuilding pieces on the bench. And that was my reason for saying, I'm not so sure I understand. Like, you've got Trey Jones, been around a while. You kind of know what he is. Isaac Okoro, Patrick Williams, Jalen Smith. Like, they're all fine players. And it's not the worst bench, but there's no high end talent. And there's no real like guy that you would look at and say, okay, he's who we're, they pick up Rob Dillingham. I guess you could argue maybe the second swing of him. Is there anything there? Minnesota was high on him. I'm not so sure. Like, guy coming out of Duke a couple years ago. And then Dalen Swain, that's another name that I kind of look at and I say, all right, not terrible, but I'm not sure what's there. I mean, the guy's only 21 years old, but it's just like they've got, frankly, a more veteran bench, but they're a team that's trying to rebuild. I would almost rather see them go the Brooklyn route. So for me, it was 14. I don't have much beyond that as in terms of why. It just, I thought there were better benches in this conference.
Well, I didn't have him far off, and it's good to talk. I have him 13, so one spot
Yeah.
higher on my list with the Bulls, and a lot. I like Trey Jones, good player, can get you 14, 15 points off the bench, decent facilitator. I think was close to 5 assists last year. Not a great shooter. Another, bench unit that if you look across the shooting lineup, and I kind of had it Trey Jones, Dillingham, Okoro, Williams, and Smith. None of those guys are shooting over 37% from deep either. Dillingham and Trey Jones, that's two really small bodies at the guard position. Okoro's not really got a lot of size at the 3 either. The Patrick Williams experience has been going on for so long. And last year, I'm sure Bulls fans are probably even more tuned into this than I was. But last year, his numbers were bad. I mean, 7 points a game on 37% from the field. Like, yikes for a guy you're trying to kind of be your stretch 4. Like, none of these guys really do anything for me. Jalen Smith, we know him. We know he's a solid big. He's not, particularly great at anything. He'll finish around the rim. He'll hit a 3-pointer here and there. He's okay at defending the rim, and I'm probably even stretching it a little bit there. So there's just not a lot of huge punch or excitement. It's just a bunch of dudes, small guards out there thrown out. But the reason I had this team I'll get to below was, at least with this, there is some matter of scoring punch, I felt like, coming off the bench. And I went with the Toronto Raptors at 14. And that is because I think they have the worst offensive bench in the East. I just looking across their guys, and who I went with as my 5 was Jamal Sheed, Jacoby Walter, Colin Murray-Boyles, Kyle Anderson, and Trace Jackson Davis. And of all those guys, the highest guy, point per game score of that group on this was at 8 points per game last year. The only one who didn't have a 10-point per game averager. And I actually kind of found that surprising when I kind of went through this exercise, because I felt like the way Toronto played, that they were kind of a deeper team, and why these rankings are hard, because that's not necessarily maybe how I feel if they're playing, because one, they might have one of the worst offensive benches. They've got a really good defensive bench. Sheed, Walter, and Murray-Boyles are all solid, pesky, wing size. Jamal Sheed's good on point of attack defense. Like, I like all of that. I think the Raptors make it work because they have enough playmakers in that starting unit between Barrett and Barnes and Quickly that they kind of rotate these guys in and out, so they keep that defensive identity there in place. And then but if I look at this as just a team, and you're talking Sheed, Walter, Murray-Boyles, Anderson, and Trace Jackson Davis, I mean, where's your offense? Sheed can play make a little bit. He did well off the bench last year, had over 5 assists a game, which is good for a guard. But I mean, you're asking a lot at that point. The other guys aren't particularly good shooters outside of Walter. Kyle Anderson obviously has had a very good career, but he is on the way back half at this point. And really slow-footed. He's smart. He's a good team defender, but not going to be great at the point of attack. And so I just had to pull myself back. And if you took this lineup and as a bench unit going into the season, I believe they will probably average the least points per game of any unit we talk about today.
So that was at 13 for you, or 14?
14 for Raptors, and then the Bulls were the next team.
Bulls at 13. Okay.
Yes.
Listen, I did not necessarily pick up that on the Raptors, the scoring piece. Let me get to them in a little bit because we're not
Yep.
quite there yet. I'm going to go 13. My team here was the Miami Heat. Okay.
Okay.
And I understand that they make the veteran signings. We talked about Klay Thompson in our last episode, factors to be a starter. So now Tim Hardaway Jr. comes into this second unit. You've got some other guys on there that Pelle Larsson averaged about 11 points a game last year, not terrible. Jovic they've always looked to get a little bit more out of him. Like they want him to be kind of this shooting wing. We'll see. Bobby Portis is kind of the guy that's, to me, the most sure thing. You're going to play him at the 4-5. He can, but as a backup center, like I just think that team is so small now. Like Bam is a small center. Giannis, you're going to play at the 4. I mean, Drew Smith is their backup point guard. I don't even know who that is. Like, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I don't know who that is. And he was one of the names that I circled with a question mark. And so they lose Jaime Jaquez Jr. They lose Kalel Ware. They use Yaki Sionis or whatever his name was. They just lost a lot of guys in that Giannis trade that were guys that played a lot of minutes off the bench for them. And so I look at the Heat and I say, yeah, Tim Hardaway Jr., but when are we going to finally just admit that he's not he is so far past his prime? He is a terrible defender. You rely on him to be a streaky shooter. He is not a guy that I look at night in and night out and say, okay, he's a meaningful part of this rotation. I like Bobby Portis. I mean, hell, Portis had great series against us in a Bucks uniform on a number of occasions, but outside of that, I just think they're kind of grasping at straws from a bench perspective. I had them at 13. I think we'll wait to see where you go. I'll just sort of transition into my number 12 here. And I feel like Chris Denary, right, with my sheet, because this is just such a difficult exercise. But I had another, what I'm going to call Eastern Conference title contending team at 12, and that's the Cleveland Cavaliers. Okay. I look down their list and I say, okay, Craig Porter Jr., Sam Merrill, Proctor fits in somewhere here, Jalen Tyson, Naquan Tomlin, Thomas Bryant. All right. So Thomas Bryant, we know the Thomas Bryant experience. Never forget the game 6, trifecta explosion. Thank you for your service, an IU guy. But let's be realistic. Okay. He's not really factoring in. They play obviously a lot of Mobley at the backup 5. They have, the 2 guys that play in the why can I Jared Allen? I can't think of his name. Naquan Tomlin's a guy that's kind of just lingered around two-way, always does well in summer league. I'm not sure how much him or Jalen Tyson are moving the needle for me. Frankly, I think Tyson kind of came out strong in his rookie year and sort of has hit his ceiling. Like he's not going to be their next starting 3. That's why you make the Peyton Watson move. Sam Merrill, good, not great. But again, they lose a Dean Wade, they lose a Schroeder, a Keon Ellis, DeAndre Hunter. I mean, they've had so many different names. What was the guy before that? The guard from Virginia. I don't know why I can't think of his name. It doesn't matter right now. The one that Tyrese kind of shut down in that playoff series. And was it Ty Jerome?
Ty Jerome.
Yeah, and he was, he was kind of a 6 man of the year candidate. I just look at it and I say, no continuity, no consistency. You move off of a guy in Strus that was kind of a bench player for them, depending upon who was in the lineup. I know he started a lot of games too, but I just look at the Cavs and I say, nobody that you talk about, nobody that you're just giving the ball to. It's not like you're going to say, hey, Sam Merrill, go lead this unit, right? He may go off for 15, hit a couple of threes, but I don't love it. And so I've got them at 12.
Yeah, this is why we do this exercise, Brad. And I'm going to take a step back because I had the Heat in a very different spot, and so this is where we're gonna be able to go back and forth a little bit. But let me react to the Cavs because I had them one spot higher at 11. I think you said you had them at 12, right?
I'm at 12.
good luck, fans, trying to keep up with where we're at, because when we start going all over the place with these teams, it's going to be wild. But
No shot.
let's stick on the Cavs, because I had them one spot up, so very similar ranking. And gosh, you could go back and forth. I mean, I'm not splitting hairs on who. So I had kind of the same unit. And my thought of maybe having them slightly higher is I think Jalen Tyson is a really enticing piece. I think he's shown the physical size he brings, the shooting promise. He's been inching up in his career. Nice, 6'6". He's still young at 23 years old. On this list of at least the guys below this from, the Bulls and the Nets and the Raptors, Sam Merrill to me is the best player we had named so far, albeit he's not going to do anything crazy, but he's a true guy you can trust in playoff moments. I mean, he's played big games. He hits big shots. He averages close to 13 points a game off the bench for them. Craig Porter Jr., very interesting as he kind of gets an expanded role going into next season as the Cavs have, filtered in some different guards, as you mentioned. I've actually liked him passing my eye test a little bit more than the numbers probably say. I mean, last year, 4 points per game, 36% from deep. Nothing really wows you. The Mario Hezonja piece, I don't know if you mentioned him. We'll see what that looks like coming back at age 31 for playing in Europe for a few years. And then, Thomas Bryant. He can play. Is he one of the best bigs off the bench? No. Is he probably middle of the pack? Yeah, he does some things. Great bench guy, great locker room guy, but nothing here where I look and get overly excited, and particularly on the playmaking front. I just, none of these guys scream, Craig Porter Jr. is going to be thrown into that role. I just don't know if that's going to be where he is, although there has been some signs of that. We just haven't seen it on a big scale. So we're pretty aligned there. Let me go backward to my number 12 position so we can catch up here. And that was the Orlando Magic. And I want to say a caveat here because I'm kind of making the assumption that Anthony Black will be coming off the bench, and he's by far the best name we've mentioned so far. Anthony Black has true size. He's still young, 6'7", big guy, can defend wings, can defend guards, strong playmaker. I mean, last year he averaged 15, 4, and 4. Like that's a guy who could enter, and we'll get to this a little bit, a 6 man of the year conversation if he has a good run. Then you start going into you were talking about who are these guys? And I went down some of the rabbit hole of Jamal Cain, Tristan Da Silva. We know Jonathan Isaac still flirting around with there. They've got Goga Batadze. Vujicic is back. He pretty much was exiled by the Celtics. So how much do you really rely on that? Although he had decent numbers last year, 15 points, 8 rebounds. So there's a little bit of Vujicic is there, and Anthony Black is solid that you could probably boister this up a little bit, but I'm just not excited by anything. Another really poor shooting bench. Outside of Anthony Black, you just don't have a lot of things that interest me. And so where the Cavs, to me, like Tyson's a real player. Sam Merrill is a real player. Thomas Bryant, we know can play limited, but can play. Where here I'm like, you're picking at things to put even a real unit out here at times. And let's make one quick side note, because I think you got into this on Twitter, that the Magic have passed the Pacers in Eastern Conference playoff odds. We have a better starting unit. We have 2 better stars than they have in Paolo and Franz, and we have a better bench unit. So what on earth is the real argument that the Magic, who have been bounced in the first round of playoffs routinely, and the Pacers have gone to back-to-back Eastern Conference finals when we have been healthy, that there is any reason to put this team above the Pacers? But that's a side tangent.
Oh, listen, I'm here for the side tangent because it's absolutely asinine. And it's a point we've made a number of times on this show that I continue to not understand. If you're going to put the Celtics and Jason Tatum off of an Achilles at your 3rd highest odds to win the conference, we saw it for a dozen games last year, a dozen and a half games. I don't remember what it was with Tatum when he came back, but that's the only thing I can think of, Ryan, is the Tyrese. Is he going to look like himself? The rest of it, there's no reason we should even be in the conversation with the Orlando Magic based on results over the last number of seasons. So that said, I probably overemphasize some players on their bench much more than you did, because I have them significantly higher on my list. Go. The Anthony Black thing I think is huge. I thought he was a most improved player of the year candidate last year. a guy that would start on a lot of teams in this league, and I think he's got more left. So we'll get to them when we get to them. That was your 12. Cavs were 11,
Yep.
right? So to go through your rankings, I'm going to try right now. You had the Nets, then you had the
Raptors.
Raptors, then it was the Bulls, it was the Magic, and the Cavs.
Cavs.
Okay. So for me, it's Nets, Bulls, Heat, Cavs. We're ready for my 11. I hope that the listeners are somehow following this. I had the Bucks at 11.
Okay.
Okay. And Milwaukee, I think their bench got better. Okay. As a result of the Giannis trade, right? They picked up some depth pieces that I think now make them a little bit more compelling. And I don't like Kevin Porter Jr. Okay, character if flaws abound, but the guy can go get a bucket, and so he's a backup guard for them. Usman Dieng, I don't necessarily hate. Gary Trent Jr. The contract was whack, but we know he can fill it up and get streaky on certain nights. Like to me, he's no different than Tim Hardaway Jr. Like you have to put them in the same conversation at this point. But where it really starts to kind of turn for me, they draft Nate Ament, they draft Braden Berries. They get Khalil Ware. Like there are some things there that I look at. They've got Karis LeVert in the rotation. Like I don't know how much he's going to play, but he's on the roster. There's just some things where I say, okay, like really for me, it's probably more the young talent mixed with guys that you kind of know. Whereas like I look at a Miami Heat bench and yeah, you've got a Portis and you've got a Tim Hardaway Jr. and a Jovic. Like I'm looking at the Bucks and I'm saying I like Khalil Ware long term way better than Bobby Portis. I like their young guys, Ament, Braden Berries. You can cross out Gary Trent Jr. and Tim Hardaway Jr. in my mind. So there was just more here that intrigued me. They're not going to play any meaningful games, so it doesn't matter. Like this is not depth that is going to carry them anywhere, but I absolutely think Khalil Ware is outplaying Miles Turner by mid-year. Like they may be playing Turner just to keep his trade value propped up so they can try and offload that atrocious contract. But Khalil Ware is a better player than Miles Turner. He will be getting worked in practice. This is the Andrew Bynum, Roy Hibbert, psychological breakdown of all those years ago. Because when we brought Bynum in and when he was healthy, he was better than Hibbert in so many ways. But Roy Hibbert was the all-star and the starter because of some of the team success we had had. And I think Khalil Ware will be absolutely working Miles in practice. They'll start Miles because they are paying him like a starter. But Khalil Ware should be their center in the future. And that's why I have, the Bucks a little bit higher than some of these other teams.
Well, Brad, I have them way higher. So we aren't even going to talk about him on part 2 today. So you'll have to, part 1, you'll have to wait for part 2. And that's why I love this, because as you were talking, I was even going back in my head thinking about my Magic take, and I was like, damn it, he's right. I love Anthony Black. They're probably higher. And then, but then I can't move them up. This is a wild one to really think through. So I can't, honestly, we rarely say, but I want to see reactions to how, because I bet some people are sitting there like, how are the Magic bench this? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't like Jamal Cain and this guy. Like, what is it? So I have them way higher. So we'll get to them and I'll make my argument on why I had them as high as I did. So I will go to 10. For me, and this is where I brought in the New York Knicks. And by no means, we're starting to get into bench units that are serviceable. And if we had done tiers, like it's 10A, 10B, 10C, like this, they could be moved up to 7 in a heartbeat, and I wouldn't blink an eye. There's not a huge talent difference. And so, but when I looked and why they are a solid bench unit, Miles McBride, solid defender. He's a heat check guy, can get going. Trust in big moments. A little bit of playmaking here, but nice shooting. Will shoot over 40% from deep like he did last year. You have Alvarado, who's that pesky defender, kind of TJ McConnell-esque to a certain degree. He hit big shots. Not a particularly great three-point shooter, but a capable one in moments. Nice, decent playmaker. Jordan Clarkson honestly probably brings them down for me at this point. His finals appearance was bad. His numbers, like he used to be a continuous 6th man of the year candidate back in his Utah Jazz days. We are way past that at age 34 for Jordan Clarkson. Landry Shamet's turned himself into your prototypical off the bench role player. doesn't do anything particularly great, but can hit shots, not strong defensively, but serviceable at times. And then you have Andre Drummond, too, who's a legitimate big in this league. He might be 33, but we know what he can do with size. We know defensively he's limited, but he can hang around the rim, offensive rebounder, crusher. By no means is he a Mitchell Robinson replacement. They are not on the same playing field, and that's why the Knicks bench unit has fallen so much, where if they had Mitchell Robinson, you could argue they'd be 4 or 5, 6 spots up, and we'll get to them, I'm sure, I bet, on part 2 of this podcast. But they don't have a ton of just off the bench, just crazy scoring. McBride's there. Defensively, they're a little hit or miss. So they kind of do everything marginally well. They're marginally good shooting. They're marginally good defensively. They're marginally good rebounding wise. I'll give them the crack over the teams below here because they have big game experience. You can trust them. And so I feel good them being in the bottom half, even though they just won the championship, because we know even in Mike Brown's system, they are relying on their starters and they're filling in those guys. That's why they won the championship, and their best bench player is no longer on the team anymore. So I feel good about putting them at 10.
And we're gonna circle all the way back through this pile of shit and agree right here, because I too had them at well, no, did I go 10 already? No, I didn't.
So
no, because who did I have it? I'm so lost. I just had Bucks at 11.
Yeah.
I had Bucks at 11. Sorry, this sheet is getting wildly out of control. I have Knicks at 10 as well. And I think the reason I go is a couple of things. You said a lot of it very well, but the biggest piece to me is as much as they started to rely on their bench more last year under Mike Brown, by no means did they rely on their bench nearly as much as some of these other teams are going to above them. You said it. The starters are the ones that have led the way, and their best bench player in Mitchell Robinson is no longer there. I know Landry Shamet hit a shot, and Miles McBride will hit a shot. Like, they have guys. Clarkson didn't really do a lot in the postseason last year. I think it's fair because of how their roster is constructed that you look at it and you say, yeah, there's nobody on this bench that you're going to look at and say sixth man of the year. They add Andre Drummond, and I understand he had some nice 5-minute stretches for Philly last year, but he's not moving the needle. This is a veteran group that can kind of band-aid you in spots, hit a shot here or there to keep a run going, but you are not. Let me put it this way. If for some reason Josh Hart, OG, Mikal Bridges were out and you couldn't play them for a series and you had to start Landry Shamet for a 7-game series, whoa, that is a major red flag for this Knicks team because he can't defend and he's a streaky shooter. So there's just replacement value, I guess, is just not there from a depth perspective. And that is why I'm not even trying to throw shade at New York. I normally do on this show, and I'm not trying to do that. I just genuinely don't think that they're that strong of a unit. And to your point, they lost their best player that was their most impactful bench player last year. Now, I know that there are going to be people coming out of the woodworks that say, you don't even know what to expect from Mohamed Diawara. Like, there's people that say he's the next Pascal Siakam. And I guess I'll believe it when I see it. But I'm not putting my eggs in that basket right now. So I'm so confused on this episode because I've got to round us out with the final one. So we're going to end at 9. We'll do our top 8 in part 2. And I was lost on my sheet. I actually had the Raptors at 9, and I had made a note that you had them at 14. So I thought I had them there, but I've got them at 9, and I'm going to give you my justification, if you will. One, I'm probably a little bit higher on Colin Murray-Boyles and Trace Jackson-Davis. I thought the TJD pickup was really strong for them. I think Murray-Boyles is pretty versatile, not a scorer. But what I like about their bench is it allows them to play the same kind of style that they want to play. Big, physical, athletic. They're going to wear you down. And their entire system isn't necessarily about score, 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 right? They want to lean on you. They want to play more physical. They're going to get a lot of points at the rim. That's just kind of how they are set up. And so I do think there is something to be said for teams that don't have to change their identity, that they can run that bench unit and it's just more of the same. It gives them lineup versatility. It gives them the ability to interchange guys. They're a shorter rotation as it is. And I think that, Jakob Poeltl is not a great starting center, in my opinion, and I would not be surprised if TJD gets a little bit more run because of his athleticism, the lob game, his defensive, I'm not going to say switchability. Maybe they do some switching, but a little bit more versatile than Jakob Poeltl is. So I was just higher on the Raptors overall because of some of the scheme stuff that I think allows them to keep their identity more consistent than some of these other teams. But I can't argue with 14 either. There's nobody on, to use the barometer of who's your sixth man of the year candidate, who are you getting really excited about? I guess it's Colin Murray-Boyles, but that's a stretch. So that's who I had at 9, kind of rounding out my slate, from 9 to 15 today.
Yeah, you bring up a really interesting point too, because during this exercise, do you look at the bench unit as just the bench unit? Because at that point, I stick on mine where they're 14 because offensively they just don't have much excitement. But if you know how the team's going to play, what the energy, and they're going to always have different guys in the lineup with these guys to bring a little bit more offense along, that bench unit definitely probably rises up a little bit. But if you're a blind GM and you have no idea who your team is, I don't know why you would take the Raptors bench, if that makes sense. Like, there's just, you don't know your style. If you don't have a lot of scoring in your offense or your starting unit, my God, what's your goal here? Playmaking. So I will round out my list here at 9 with the Miami Heat. So I alluded that I had them a little bit higher up, but I think we're going to have most of the same teams. I'll be curious. I know the Bucks aren't in mine, and so one must be different than yours, but I'll make my case why I maybe had them a little bit higher. And that's because between Bobby Portis, Tim Hardaway Jr., Pele Larson, and Jovic, those are guys. Like, all of those are true NBA guys. I know Jovic hasn't lived up to any of the hype that he initially had, but he can play. And a lot of these units have gaps of, like, is this guy going to be a guy? We'll see if, some development happens here where, like, if you're the Heat, you can play Bobby Portis, Tim Hardaway Jr., Pele Larson, Jovic. As I said, I'm with you on the Drew Smith. Went down that rabbit hole a little bit. More of a organizer than a playmaker. He's a solid shooter, but to give that edge, I've talked about some of the lack of shooting in these bench units where they don't have a single guy averaging over 30% from deep or 37% from deep. This guy in this unit, all of them shoot 37% from deep or above. So you are getting a little bit of shooting. Now, I caveat that not a ton of volume outside of Hardaway Jr., so it's a little bit of that Darren Collison effect when he led the league in three-point shooting, but he's basically only shooting wide-open attempts in like 3 or 4 a game. So how do you quantify that on a different scale? But I do think they have some size in there, not necessarily size at the center position particularly, but they'll rotate Giannis and Bam obviously at that. But we know Bobby Portis, he averages 13 points a game, 6 rebounds. Tim Hardaway was still, even at age 33 last year, was averaging 13 points a game. Larson, when I went down that rabbit hole a little bit, I didn't know a ton about him, but averaging 11 points a game. So I found some offense in here, some real dudes and I think I looked at it a little bit more from the lens of if I'm blind picking benches, not knowing at all what I'm going to get from any other unit here on my team or that, I could see taking this unit because there's some punch with Bobby Portis. There's some streakiness with Tim Hardaway Jr. There's some upside with Jovic in terms of game to game. You see some flashes. And so that's kind of where I landed with this unit. And a fun exercise I had through this that really brought to life, and obviously neither of us have mentioned the Pacers yet. I think we're both going to have them very high on our list, and that is not just a biased take. We know why that they're going to be very high on our list, but you look at these guys, there's real arguments, and this is a completely biased, but like when I was looking through the Magic and the Raptors, Jalen Slauson is playing for these guys. Like, there's no question to me he'd be in their rotation. Not a two-way guy. He would be on the floor getting 12 to 15 minutes a night, just based on size, defense, rebound, playmaking, and if there's any shooting element he brings. And so it's really a testament to how deep this team is. And I know probably the non-Pacer listeners like Jalen Slauson do that. I assure you, like, do the deep dive, see what he did in his minutes last year for us, because it's better than, what I said, bringing in Jamal Cain off the bench for the Magic. You say what you will, but it just is in my book. There's no way I'm taking him over. So any final thoughts, Brad, as the listener tries to figure out our list?
Well, it'll be interesting when we get to the Pacers. This is a Pacers podcast. Who are five? Do we have the same five? Because if we do, then I would add some other names to not just Jalen Slauson, some guys that are going to fall out of our top 10-man rotation that would be stalwarts in some of these other bench units, like guys that maybe they don't fill up the scoreboard, but are proven NBA talents, and not, you don't get that everywhere on this list. But let me recap here as we kind of work our way through this meandering maze of part one. Ryan, I had you Nets at 15, you had Raptors at 14, Bulls at 13, Magic 12, Cavs 11, Knicks 10, Heat at 9. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. I go Nets 15. I had the Bulls 14, Heat 13, Cavs 12, Bucks 11, Knicks 10, and Raptors at 9. So NBA fans, Pacers fans, please let us know your thoughts. This is a little, I don't want to say outside of the comfort zone. We watch a heck of a lot of basketball on this show, but this is getting into the weeds, as they say. And I'll tell you what, I'm very curious to see how this top 8 stack up for us going into part 2. So Pacers fans, let us know your thoughts on our rankings here, 15 down to 9. Be sure to tune in on Friday morning for part 2, our rankings 1 through 8. We'll start at the back and go 8 down to 1. And then we're going to tease a little bit of 6th man of the year candidates in the East. Ryan and I have a few on a short list that we think could be in that conversation. So appreciate you guys listening as always.